For decades, the United States has presented itself to the world as a beacon of democracy, the defender of freedom, the global policeman that keeps the peace and protects the weak from the tyranny of authoritarian regimes. It has wrapped itself in the mantle of moral authority, projecting an image of a nation that fights for human rights, promotes the rule of law, and stands as the ultimate guarantor of international stability. But beneath this carefully crafted exterior, a far more sinister transformation has been quietly taking place, a shift in the very nature of American power that is making the United States not the world protector, but its greatest threat, a danger far more insidious and far more destructive than the dictators and terrorists that it claims to be fighting against. The world has been conditioned to fear the nuclear ambitions of North Korea, the imperial ambitions of Russia, the technological weaponry of China, and the religious extremism of Iran. But while the world focuses its attention on these familiar enemies, the United States has been stealthily building a system of global dominance that is far more comprehensive, far more invasive, and far more capable of controlling the destiny of every person on this planet than any of its rivals could ever hope to achieve. This is not about military power alone. This is not about economic supremacy alone. This is about a comprehensive system of control that combines military might, financial manipulation, technological surveillance, and cultural hegemony into a single, seamless, and unstoppable instrument of global domination. The American military budget is larger than the next 10 countries combined. The American intelligence apparatus is the most sophisticated in human history. The American financial system controls the global economy through the power of the dollar. The American technology sector has its tentacles wrapped around every aspect of modern life, from the devices in our pockets to the algorithms that shape our thoughts. And the American cultural machine churns out narratives that shape the way billions of people around the world think, feel, and act. This is not a nation that is simply defending itself. This is a nation that is building an empire that does not need to conquer territory because it has already conquered the minds, the economies, and the institutions of the entire world. And the most terrifying part of all is that most people do not see it. They do not understand the extent of American power. They do not understand the ruthlessness with which it is wielded. They do not understand the consequences of a world where there is no counterweight to American dominance, no check on American ambition, and no escape from American control. The world is sleepwalking into a new form of tyranny, a tyranny that is not imposed by foreign armies, but by a system that we have all been conditioned to accept, a system that we have all been taught to trust, and a system that is quietly destroying the very foundations of freedom that it claims to protect. To fully understand why the United States has become the world's most dangerous power, we must first rewind the clock to the end of the Second World War, a moment when the world was utterly devastated, a moment when the old empires of Europe had been shattered, and the United States of America emerged as the only nation on earth with the economic, military, and industrial capacity to shape the future of the entire planet. The United States did not seek this role out of pure altruism. It sought out of pure self-interest, driven by a profound and deeply ingrained belief that its own security and prosperity depended on creating a global order that was structured in its own image and that served its own interests. This was the era of the Bretton Woods system, an ambitious and far-reaching plan to create a new international financial order that would be dominated by the American dollar, ensuring that the United States would control the global economy for generations to come. This was the era of the Marshall Plan, a massive and strategically brilliant program to rebuild war-torn Europe, not just out of charity, but to create a bloc of loyal allies that would serve as a bulwark against the spread of Soviet communism and a captive market for American goods. This was the era of the NATO alliance, a military pact that gave the United States a permanent military presence in Europe and a network of bases that encircled the Soviet Union. But this was also the era of the Cold War, a period of immense tension, nuclear terror, and proxy conflict that pitted the United States against the Soviet Union in a struggle for global supremacy. The United States justified its actions as a defense of freedom against the tyranny of communism, but the reality was far more complex and far more troubling. The United States overthrew democratically elected governments in Iran, in Guatemala, in Chile, and in countless other nations, simply because they did not align with American interests. It supported brutal dictatorships in South Korea, in South Vietnam, in Indonesia, and across Latin America, simply because they were anti-communist regardless of their horrific human rights records. It waged a secret and illegal war in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, killing millions of innocent civilians and leaving behind a legacy of destruction that continues to haunt the region to this day. And when the Soviet Union finally collapsed in 1991, the United States stood triumphant, the sole remaining superpower on Earth, a unipolar hegemon with no rival, no challenger, and no equal. The world expected the United States to use its immense power to build a new era of peace, democracy, and global cooperation. Instead, the United States used its power to entrench its dominance, to expand its military reach, and to reshape the world in its own image. The hidden power of the United States lies not in its military might alone, but in a far more pervasive and insidious system of control that combines four distinct and mutually reinforcing layers of dominance: financial, military, technological, and cultural. Each layer is formidable on its own, but when combined, they create an instrument of global control that is unprecedented in human history, a system that is so comprehensive and so all-encompassing that it is almost invisible to the people who are trapped within it. The financial layer is perhaps the most powerful and the least understood. The American dollar is the world's reserve currency, meaning that every nation on Earth must hold dollars to conduct international trade, creating a permanent and unassailable demand for American money that allows the United States to run massive deficits without facing the consequences that would bankrupt any other nation. The American financial system controls the global payments network, allowing the United States to cut off any country from the global economy with a stroke of a pen, a weapon known as dollar hegemony that has been used to cripple Iran, to strangle North Korea, and to threaten Russia with economic Armageddon. The military layer is also formidable and overwhelming. The United States has more than 800 military bases spread across every continent, a network so vast and so pervasive that it encircles the entire globe. It has the most advanced air force, the most powerful navy, and the most technologically sophisticated army in human history. Its nuclear arsenal is capable of destroying the world many times over. But these conventional and nuclear capabilities are just the tip of the iceberg. The United States has also developed a vast and secret arsenal of cyber weapons, space weapons, and electronic warfare capabilities that are capable of disabling the infrastructure of any nation on Earth, from its power grids to its financial systems to its communication networks, all without firing a single shot. The technological layer is perhaps the most intrusive and the most difficult to resist. The American technology sector, led by giants like Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta, has its tentacles wrapped around every aspect of modern life. American tech companies control the search engines, the social media platforms, the cloud computing infrastructure, and the operating systems that the entire world depends on. This gives the United States access to an unprecedented trove of data about every person on Earth, data that can be used for surveillance, for manipulation, for control, and for projecting power in ways that were previously unimaginable. And finally, the cultural layer is the most insidious and the most effective. American movies, American music, American television shows, and American social media platforms dominate global culture, shaping the way billions of people think, feel, and act. American values, American narratives, and American ideals are projected across the world as a universal standard, making it almost impossible for any alternative worldview to gain traction. This cultural hegemony makes American power acceptable, even desirable, to billions of people who have no idea that they are being manipulated, controlled, and exploited. The consequences of this American hegemony are devastating for the rest of the world. Every nation, every society, every culture, and every individual is being affected by the relentless expansion of American power. The ripples of American influence are spreading across the globe, touching every corner of human existence, and the effects are only going to intensify as American dominance deepens and the mechanisms of control become more sophisticated. In the Middle East, the United States has waged a continuous war for more than 2 decades, a war that has killed millions of people, displaced tens of millions more, and destabilized an entire region. The wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Libya have created a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions, giving rise to new waves of terrorism, fueling a refugee crisis that has overwhelmed Europe, and creating a vacuum of chaos that has been filled by Iran, Russia, and other adversaries of the United States. The American military is now more entrenched in the Middle East than ever, not as a force for peace and stability, but as a force for perpetual conflict and endless war. In Latin America, the United States has a long and sordid history of intervention, regime change, and economic exploitation, using its power to install dictators, overthrow democracies, and destabilize entire countries to protect American corporate interests. The war on drugs, launched with the best intentions, has become a catastrophic failure, fueling violence, corruption, and instability across the region. American trade policies like NAFTA and CAFTA have destroyed local economies, driving millions of people into poverty and fueling an unprecedented wave of migration to the United States. In Asia, the United States is engaged in a dangerous and escalating rivalry with China, a rivalry that could easily spiral into a catastrophic war that would devastate the entire continent and plunge the world into economic chaos. The American military is building new bases across Asia, expanding its military presence, and conducting provocative military exercises that are heightening tensions and increasing the risk of a catastrophic miscalculation. The American alliance with Japan and South Korea, once a stabilizing force, is now a source of tension and conflict, as the United States pushes its allies to confront China in ways that are against their own national interests. In Africa, the United States is waging a secret war against terrorists, a war that is largely invisible to the American public, but that is causing immense suffering and instability across the continent. The American military has established a network of bases across Africa, from Djibouti to Niger to Somalia, engaging in drone strikes, special operations, and proxy warfare that is killing thousands of civilians and fueling local conflicts. American corporations are extracting resources from Africa at an alarming rate, exploiting the continent's wealth while leaving its people in poverty. The global ripple is spreading, touching every nation, every society, and every individual. The world is being reshaped in the image of American power, a power that claims to be benevolent but is actually brutal, a power that claims to promote democracy but actually crushes it, a power that claims to protect freedom but actually destroys it. And yet, despite this immense power, the United States is not invincible. It has vulnerabilities, weaknesses, and flaws that are becoming increasingly apparent as its empire begins to show signs of strain. The American economy, once the engine of global growth, is now a tangle of debt, inequality, and structural decay. The American political system, once a model of democratic governance, is now a corrupt and dysfunctional mess, paralyzed by polarization, captured by special interests, and incapable of addressing the challenges that the nation faces. The American military, once a magnificent instrument of power, is now overstretched, demoralized, and bogged down in endless conflicts that drain its resources and its morale. The American intelligence community, once a brilliant and effective tool of foreign policy, is now a massive and unaccountable bureaucracy that is more concerned with protecting its own power than with serving the nation. The internal contradictions of American power are becoming impossible to ignore. The gap between the rich and the poor is growing. The social fabric is fraying. The trust in institutions is collapsing. The national unity is shattered. And as the American empire begins to fray, it is becoming more dangerous, not less. A declining power is a power that is more likely to lash out, more likely to take risks, more likely to start wars to protect its dominance. The pivot point has arrived. The United States can either confront its problems, reform its system, and build a new era of cooperation and partnership with the rest of the world. Or it can continue on its current path, a path of perpetual conflict, endless war, and relentless expansion that will eventually destroy the nation itself and drag the rest of the world down with it. The question is not whether the United States will collapse. The question is whether it can change in time to avoid a catastrophe. As we stand at this critical juncture, the future of the United States and the world forks into two distinct paths, two completely different destinies. In the first path, the United States recognizes the danger of its own power, reforms its financial system, reinvests in its crumbling infrastructure, restores its democracy, and begins to act as a responsible member of the international community. In this future, the world remains multipolar, competitive, and uneasy, but it does not collapse. It does not succumb to conflict. It survives. In the second path, the United States continues on its current trajectory, expanding its military empire, lashing out at its enemies, and ignoring its internal problems. In this future, The American empire eventually collapses under the weight of its own contradictions, triggering a catastrophic crash that destroys the global economy and plunges the world into chaos. The superpower that once saved the world from tyranny becomes the force that destroys it. The question is not whether the United States will remain the world's dominant power. The question is whether we use that power wisely or recklessly. And the answer depends on the choices that are made by ordinary people, by citizens, by voters, and by every person who understands what is at stake. The map never lies. But the people drawing it always have a reason. We just saw why the United States is secretly becoming the world's most dangerous power. But there is one nation quietly preparing to challenge its dominance. That is the next journey. Which future do you believe? Comment Future 1 or Future 2. And subscribe to Atlas Beyond so you never miss the next journey.